What was your, oh crap, this person is a psychopath moment when meeting people? So, when I was a teenager, my mom signed me up for a horse camp. The first person I met that day was the daughter of the family running the camp. Throughout the entire day, though, I noticed her purposefully inflicting pain on these horses and clearly getting enjoyment from it. The thing that stuck with me was how it wasn't in an obvious way, like hitting or kicking them. She would walk by one, pinch it, go to put a halter on and sharply twist its ear, etc. She would laugh at their reaction. Or if someone saw the reaction, start talking about what an awful horse it was. This was 10 plus years ago, and I still think about her from time to time. To this day, she is the only person I have ever met that I wholeheartedly believed she was a psychopath. Next story. I went to college with a guy that we all called the Russian. His entire personality was wrapped up in being from Russia. He always talked about it, referred to it, etc. If you were out in public with him, he'd turn to you and go, "Did you see that guy? Totally had Russian mob and tattoos." And it happened so much that we figured out at the least that some of it has to be exaggerated or made up. Tons of little lies, like he's telling you he would give you $20 to drive him home, but ask to stop at Circle K first. Then he'd use the $20 to buy cigarettes and give you the change. One time, though, he asked me, "You have a car, right?" And he knew I did. Well, his plan was to rob his drug dealer. He said all I had to do was drive and stand there looking menacing with a gun. I told him I'm not interested. I don't even own a gun, and I don't know how to use one, so hard pass. I avoided talking to him after that one. Then, after college, a mutual friend and I were working together, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, remember Alexei the Russian? Well, I met his mom." And it turns out, everybody, Alexei was not Alexei, it was Alexander. Turns out, not adopted from Russia at a young age, grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona. Absolutely nothing the guy had ever said was true. Then, a few years later, I'm telling this story to a coworker of mine, and the next day she comes in with a link to a news article, and she asks me, "Is it this guy?" It was. He had convinced the brother of the mutual friend that I used to work with to go along with his rob my drug dealer plan. The brother got killed by the dealer, and the Russian is spending life in prison on the hook for it. So everybody, I would like to point out, as a narrator, I took some creative liberties. Nowhere here was it mentioned that he actually had a Russian accent, but rarely do I get the opportunity to use one and bust it out in a video, so I just went for it. Anyway, next story. Years ago, I interviewed to work at an organization for troubled kids. The final step in the process was something called a shadow week, where I would work a regular schedule for a week, be paid for it, and at the end I would have the final opportunity to either take or turn down the job. So, first day I'm sort of just hanging back and watching everything. Group of kids I was with ran the spectrum of issues, but nothing that made me feel unsafe to be around. Then this kid walks up and introduces himself. He was about 14 years old, came across as very nice and asked me some questions. His entire demeanor came off as if he was the de facto leader of the group. Kids tend to naturally fall into this kind of social hierarchy, so I didn't think much of it. Well, after talking to me for a few minutes, he walks away, and immediately afterwards, one of the workers comes up and asked me what he was asking me and what I had told him. It was all very surface level stuff, but what the worker told me next shook me. They said, "Don't ever talk to that kid one-on-one or tell him anything about yourself." Why? He will get in your head and find ways to use it against you. Then, the worker proceeded to tell me some of the reasons this kid was in the program, and it made my skin crawl. SAing siblings, physical and sexual violence against girls and boys, manipulating kids into doing similar acts to other kids, and other things that I won't even mention. He warned me that he would 100% try to cozy up to me and talk to me, and that when he did, I was to tell him that I wasn't allowed to talk to him outside of any scheduled therapy sessions or any other official activities one-on-one, and that he knows the deal. So, sure enough, next day during lunch, he comes over to where I'm sitting and starts talking to me, and I give him the rehearsed response. I do not exaggerate when I say this. It is like he literally became a different person after I said that. You know how in Jaws when Quint talks about the lifeless black eyes of a shark? That is exactly what I saw in this kid. It was like a switch turned off. Utterly cold and lifeless. His posture changed. His obviously practiced smile and way of speaking changed. the mask genuinely came off. He cocked his head slightly and then looked at me, and I had two thoughts run through my head. One, if this kid ever got me alone, I had no doubt in my mind that he would try to kill me. Two, this kid will 100% end up in prison for either SA, murder, or both. So then, anyway, while he's doing that, I said, I see. His voice and tone was even different from what I had experienced the day before. Don't want me to know too much, right? And before I could say anything, he stood up and said, good luck with the rest of this week. It's hard to describe, but everything about what he said felt like a threat. So, from that point on for the rest of the week, this kid didn't say a word to me. But every time I looked up, I could see him staring at me, sizing me up. It was deeply unsettling. So, I ended up not taking the job. Now I work as a high school teacher, been doing it for 10 years, and I have had kids with all kinds of issues, but that kid is the only one I would ever call a genuine psychopath. A part of me wonders if he was possessed by a demon, because what I saw after he realized there was no point in keeping up the facade felt inhuman. That's the only way I could ever describe it. Next story. So, over 20 years ago, in my youth, I met this cool girl. I really can't even remember how or where. She was smart, beautiful, and funny, and I was a shy woman hidden in a corner. She dragged me out and took me on adventures, and we had a blast. Although there was constant drama in her life that made me tired sometimes, but you know the type of person I mean. But anyway, she had this on and off again boyfriend. I never knew if they were on or off, but one day he was the best thing ever, was hanging out with us, and the next day she hated his guts. Then, he got a new girlfriend during one of their breaks. She was furious. It should be noted that she wasn't a nun when they weren't together, so she's ranting and shouting, and I'm being a good friend agreeing that yes, men do indeed suck. Then she says she's gonna cut his brake lines. Oh, and his mother's too. His mother was not her biggest fan, so I'm thinking she's just letting off steam and venting and would never in a million years do this. She was a very kind, sweet, and generous loving person to everyone around her, whenever I was around and to me. So anyway, she was in fact not kidding. She drove to his mother's house where he also lived in the dead of the night and did exactly what she said she would do. Luckily though, by some miracle, one of them realized something was wrong before they even left the driveway, and the other figured it out a short while later while not driving very fast. So anyway, I am in shock she actually did it. Then she gets angry and starts shouting and venting because it didn't work and they are both fine. Yeah, that was the last time I ever hung out with her again. And then I think her mother might have also been a bit crazy. At one of her birthday toasts to her daughter, it included how proud she was she made it through high school without getting pregnant. What? Next story. When I met my wife's aunt, this woman looked me dead in the eyes and said ICE agents should be positioned on rooftops with sniper rifles, taking out every Mexican they spot. I'm Native American, and I wonder if she mistook me for Mexican, because why would she say that to me completely unprompted? That's probably the most unsafe I've ever felt around another person. I told my wife that her aunt isn't welcome at our house anymore. Absolute psychopath. Next story. When I was younger, a new kid moved down the street from me. He was extremely violent to animals, wild and domestic. I hated him, but my parents made me hang out with him because his mom and my mom became friends. At first, it was small things. He was a little league pitcher and very good. Well, he would chain his dog up and use it as target practice with rocks. Then he would let the dog go, and the dog would try to bite you. He would also throw rocks at birds on power lines with a deadly accuracy. But these are the two most disturbing things. One day, I was walking through the woods to get home, and off in the distance, I see the kid, and he has a stick, and he just keeps smacking something on the ground with it. As I got closer, I hear a wet thud and a smack. As I got closer, I saw what he was smacking. A possum. It was dead, and white-gray fur was now all red. He must have been at it for a while because around him was the other sticks he used that broke, and then he would just get a new one. I kept telling my parents that he was weird and I didn't like him, plus things started going missing when he came over. My cat then had kittens, and my parents decided to give one to the kid. It was only a few days later my parents told me what happened. He took the kitten and threw it against a brick wall until it died. The kid's parents made him go bury it in the woods, and eventually the kid went back and dug the cat's grave. Me and my friend caught him numerous times times just sitting on a log on the woods, just watching the different phases of decomposition of the animal. After the incident, my parents didn't force me to see him anymore. And in case anyone is wondering, about 20 years later, I get a friend request on Facebook from him. So I figured, come on, we're adults now. He was a child, maybe just disturbed. So I accepted his friend request, and about a day later, I receive a message from him. I open the message, and it's just a bunch of different adult content gifs, mainly of gaping buttholes. He was blocked. Next story. I had a student once who from day one was paying really close attention to another student who was autistic. Like, he spent practically 2 days studying this kid. I actually thought maybe they were friendly or he was just struggling to understand some of this kid's behaviors in an age-appropriate way. But oh no. What this child then started doing was deliberately sitting next to the autistic student, deliberately doing something that would provoke him, then dobbing the autistic student in for talking or kicking out or telling him to shut up. It was every time they came to sit on the floor. I eventually had to implement a seating plan for both tables and floor, and communicate this to all of the other teachers because whenever I wasn't in the room, he'd go right back to the autistic child and start up again. There were other kids in the class who weren't very nice to this autistic child, but this kid is the only one I've ever taught who deliberately went out of his way to provoke meltdowns. When I questioned him about it, he said, "It's funny." His parents, with whom I regularly spoke with, didn't care and kept blaming the school for letting those kind of students in, they said. But it was the most exhausting year of my career, constantly keeping them separate and keeping an eye out to ensure the autistic student was not being bullied either in class or on the playground. At the same time, I'm dealing with the parents of the autistic student who refuse to believe that he is autistic. Therefore, he wasn't allocated funding, and we couldn't get any support for him. Next story. When I was like 12, my parents visited friends of theirs who lived in a little suburb here in Belgium who had a kid who was my age, and I had already met once before. He had massive neighbor's kid energy. He had a collection of knives in his room, as well as airsoft guns, and a bow. Anyways, while parents were chatting, he took the bow and showed me to the back of the house, where there was a chicken enclosure that his family owned. He then started shooting arrows into it. Actual pointy metal-tipped arrows, but trying not to shoot the chickens themselves, but to try and impress me or something. A little while later, he was showing me a knife, and suddenly made a motion to pretend to stab me with it, like a "made you flinch, haha" type bad joke. And I did flinch with my hands up and left my hand caught on the blade and got opened up a bit between my index and middle finger. Not a huge wound, but I was still bleeding a bunch and crying even more. So I ran up to my parents, they take me to the hospital, and to this day, I have the little scar on my hand, and my parents never spoke to those friends of theirs again. Next story. I've only had this happen once, but I immediately picked up on the psychopath vibes. I overheard him telling a woman he'd kill her husband to be with her. He's with her now, though, to my knowledge. It was just a divorce that happened. I've seen her husband around. But what solidified it, because the whole "I'd kill for you" thing could have been misguided romance gesturing, was when he started picking on another person, calling her slurs over and over again to rile her up, so she'd attack him while she was drunk. I had to get between them. The psycho's attracted to me, and I've since learned this woman has a crush on me, so she wouldn't try and kill him. He then spent the rest of the night trying to rile everybody else up until the Uber driver who stops in the bar regularly offered to drive him and his friend home. He wasn't just being rowdy either. There was a genuine sense that he would have killed somebody if he was taken out of his good mood. Anyhow, he recently started a fight, and there's a zero-tolerance policy at this bar for actual fights, so he's banned now. He's threatened the owner too, so we called the cops as soon as he shows up if he tries to enter. Next story. I have a female regular at my bar who I kindly refer to as a sexual bully. She weaponizes her sexuality to make some uncomfortable, others intrigued, others in love. She's an attractive lady though, late 40s. It's always been fun and flirty until she reveals to me that she's been caught effing this guy by his wife. She's been sleeping with him for 5 years now. That sucks. It just happened and the wife is on her way to my bar to talk to her about it. At first, I'm intrigued. After watching the way she handled it, I knew that she was a psychopath though. She had no empathy, let alone sympathy. She just sat there, proud of herself for destroying this woman's life. The wife, crying her eyes out at the prominent seat at the bar, is losing her mind. The regular is just going through the motions like she could care less. She even told her details about effing him in her bed, in her home. and how she avoided detection for so long, all with a smile on her face. Then, when I heard her tell the wife that he had a beautiful wiener and the wife started sobbing uncontrollably, I had to find a place to hide. Beware of the wicked. They are among us. Next story. I made a friend on Tumblr a few years back when I was in high school. I had gotten back into creepypasta, SCP, cryptid phase, and we became mutuals through our art. We connected well because of our interests and hobbies, and we also connected due to problems, difficulties, and traumas that we shared. But to put a long story short, no. Being in the fandoms we were in, having depression, anxiety, and all of that is not a reason for you to send me gore and confess that you are a necrophile out of nowhere. No, I don't feel special because you decided to tell me. And no, I don't really want to talk to you again. I hope we never meet, and I hope we never cross paths online again. Gonna miss our collabs though, I guess. Next story. Court case. Teenage boy murdered his mom, set the house on fire to cover his tracks, but also wrote a play about it before committing the crime. He also didn't show a flicker of emotion throughout the trial, until the prosecutor tipped him up in one of his lies. It was like a flip was switched and he started booting the dock and losing it when he realized his manipulation wasn't working. Next story. Maybe not a psychopath by hard definition, but definitely a sociopath. I had a job in Amsterdam. One day, this new guy from the US was hired to work in my team as a software dev. Late 30s, kinda shy, but admittedly smart and good with Java. Long story short, this dude was the most ridiculous, insidious manchild I've ever met, doing all kinds of things that were devious that would always create conflict with me, only always to make me look like I was the crazy one in front of all of my coworkers. To the extent that after 2 years, I had a mental breakdown in the middle of a company meeting because of the crap he was doing, and how helpless I was feeling, messing with my reputation just because. I had to keep a computer folder with all kinds of evidence proving how much of a compulsive liar he was, and how he was deliberately targeting me just to make my life miserable. He eventually did get fired, mainly because of all of this, but also because after a while, he started having trouble keeping up with all of the lies he would tell before everyone else, so people started catching on to him. Next story. Shows up for a job interview online in her pajamas, and immediately starts eating a sandwich, asks me what is the reason for the meeting since she forgot, spends 1 minute vaguely talking about the job, then says people working with her usually hang out at her place, and proceeds to give me a house tour. After finishing the sandwich, licks her fingers one by one in front of the camera, then goes off on a tangent about how AI is taking over the world. I was already struggling to keep a straight face, but when she called her husband with a whistle and he actually showed up like a trained dolphin, I almost lost it. Needless to say, I did not accept the job. Next story. I work with a psychopath. I'm actually this person's boss, and he's kind of holding the whole team hostage, and it's effing awkward as hell. The thing that stands out among all of his acute psychopathy is his willingness to harm others. Literally, nothing is off limits with this guy. He will say and do anything if he thinks that causing harm to someone else will advance his agenda. Physical threats, social threats, emotional abuse, threats of financial harm. Nothing is off limits with this guy when it comes to escaping accountability. And he has just enough power to really freak out the owners. No one is really sure if his threats are empty, some of them sure aren't, and no one wants to really find out though. So we're just stuck with this dude. I'm almost 40 years old and I've never met a person like this before. Heinous individual this guy is. His willingness to harm others is just shocking. And the most shocking part about it is how natural it seems to him, how easy it is, and how quick it comes out. He is very well practiced. Next story. Had a very good friend. Everything went pretty smoothly from the get-go. We knew everything about each other's lives. Until he drank. He slapped me because someone said he couldn't go to the toilet because I was there, and he wanted to see my genitals. Worst part about this, he was crap-faced and lived very far away, so I had to take him to my apartment for the night. Worst night of my life. Was stuck in this relationship for months on end because emotional blackmail. Now I'm pretty happy to have him out of my life. Next story. I worked as a vet tech for around 5 years, and this one particular guy just outright told me about how he'd catch all of the cats that wandered onto their property and bury them in their yard with just their heads sticking out of the dirt. Dude said he'd get on his riding lawnmower and just drive over the line of heads poking out of the ground. I was horrified. I was pissed and I was bewildered that this information just spilled out of him without even the slightest hint of guilt. But more so, he was so proud of it? His wife was bringing in their pet cat that day too, so Who knows whatever happened to that poor thing? Next story. A woman who was in the music scene with me, she was a talented musician, and it was fun working with her, but I wasn't attracted to her. She didn't really take no for an answer though. Sure, she said she understood, but she always threw herself at me nonstop, even after I made it clear. That I could handle. A lot of women I've known are like that. Maybe it's me, I don't know. But what I couldn't handle was her telling me that when she was a kid, like 11ish, she shoved a firecracker up a cat's butt and lit it, killing the cat. I'm a pretty understanding person, non-judgmental, but her demeanor, when I questioned her about it, was completely unrepentant. I asked her if she had any remorse about it, and she said no. I was just looking for attention, kinda. I was a kid. But I told her a lot of kids find ways of getting attention that don't involve killing animals, and she simply shrugged. After that, I stopped talking to her. I honestly thought I would be in danger if I ever got too intoxicated around her. Next story. Online dating. Met this girl that was 19 years old. Really cute emo chick. We FaceTimed, and what ensued was the wildest crap I've ever heard from a girl. We both had BPD in common and talked about that before she revealed that she had schizophrenia. I was like, oh, this is wild, but wanted to learn more, so I asked. She talked about how she regularly sees things that she doesn't know if it's real or in her head. She talked about the figure that lives in her closet. She named him, talks to him on the regular, etc. But that's not even the wild part. As the night continues, she starts sending me pictures, just random ones of her because I had commented on how beautiful I thought she was, so she began sending selfies she had taken prior. Then she sends me one with an AR in her mouth. Oh, wow. Wild. Then she starts breathing irregularly and begins to get more close, more manic, I guess? She started talking about Germany and World War II and was heavy on Germany. I am mixed race with everything but white, basically, so I was like, okay, let's see how crazy she is. And I got her to admit that she likes the Nazis and thought that they were cool / Hitler was interesting and hot, but yet she had no problem with me being colored. Then she starts getting excited and says, Do you like gore? With a really excited face. That's the one that stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, beheadings and stuff? I mean, I saw one when I was like 13, but it was too much, and I never looked at stuff like that again, but movies are cool though. And then she says, Can I send you a picture? It's this guy that blew himself up. It's really cool. And at this point, I don't know why I didn't hang up. I think I just wanted to see how crazy she was. So she sends me a picture of the guy, and it was gross, but nothing I couldn't handle. I was more so just like, what the hell is this girl's problem? She then starts talking about these gore videos she watched, some of them mass shootings that she thought were really cool. So I finally had to change the subject and was talking about anything else. I started talking about myself and things in my room, and that's when I noticed her roll her eyes. Then about 3 minutes later, the call ends. I message her, and I'm blocked on both websites that I had her profile on. What a night, and what a human being that was. Next story. When my colleague watches me get promoted above him and makes up an entire piece of work that is substandard, and then when people tell him it's bad, he starts claiming it is mine behind my back. This man apparently married a lesbian for citizenship in Australia, got drunk and slept with married young admin staff he had power and management over, which meant she had to resign, and almost lost her fiancé, then repeated the same thing with the next admin and put her into a leadership position, which destroyed the team she was supposed to lead. He then moves on to the next younger female volunteer while also flirting and playing with the obese. He sweet talks and flirts with all of the older female managers, those without clinical training or charmed, including HR managers who try to help him gain further promotions. Eventually, he is promoted to a role where he can't go any higher in his desperate pursuit of being a CEO, because all of his behaviors have been documented and are known to senior staff who aren't charmed. He then finds another org to go to and charms their female CEO. Thankfully, I heard one of the women he took advantage of wrote to the board of the new organization. Next story. Knew a guy in my apartment complex that thought we should just kill all homeless people on the streets, including veterans. He was former military. Talked a lot about shooting dogs too. Sometimes he would just stare at you, and his eyes would go black. Could switch from happy to full of rage back to happy in a blink. If I saw him on the news, my jaw would stay in place. Next story. Well, not meeting them, but I had a girlfriend once, and a few months into it, I'm laying on my bed in a hotel room. She walks up and decks me in the eye. I jump up and go to swing, not knowing it was my girlfriend that just sucker punched me, and I see who it is, and I grab my Coke that was sitting there and throw the liquid at her. And I said, "What the hell is your problem?" Then she starts ranting about God knows what, so I gently grab her and I'm trying to get her out of my room. she all of a sudden turns on ninja mode and puts her feet up on the door and kicks off. Here we are flying in the air until I come down on the bed with her arm still on me. She says, and I quote, "I'm just kidding, let's have sex." That is when I knew I had a stage 7 psycho. But I'm semi-smart, so I figured why not one last time to satisfy her. Then afterwards, I pretended I was asleep until she left, and then I got the hell out of there and blocked her. Next story. I worked in construction, and I made a joke one time about how some women aren't small, they're fun-sized. And this one coworker would always bring it up. I later found out he was a predator, and he had been charged on a few counts. That was the moment it all clicked. All of the other jokes he made, how he'd just get quiet when we talked about being in high school, or what happens to certain inmates in jail. That was my oh crap moment. And well, I was just glad he got sent back to jail not long afterwards. Next story. I noticed something was off when I banged my head really hard in a swimming pool, and he didn't flinch, look up, or ask if I was all right. I didn't know what a psychopath was. Years later, I had been asking him to make a doctor's appointment to address his sleep sex disorder. All kinds of excuses came up though. Then one morning, he woke up with a huge spot in a very obvious part of his nose, and he booked an urgent appointment with the doctor for the pimple, but didn't find essaying his wife while he was asleep on a nearly nightly basis was grounds for medical help, but something affecting his appearance was. An argument ensued, and he said, "You know you really like it." Yeah, he was an effing psychopath. And there was just so much stuff that should have alerted me. In other moments when it hit me again, he had been controlling my food and discouraging me from eating more when I weighed less than 80 pounds. Due to anorexia, I thought he was the only one telling me the truth. I was skinny fat and needed to avoid carbs and sugar. Luckily, eating disorder doctors noticed and raised appropriate safeguarding, got him to move out, and admitted me to a hospital. After a few weeks in hospital, I was really worried about a fellow patient and just had this desperation for her to eat her meals and get stronger. It was then I realized how psychopathic it was for him to sit and watch his emaciated wife not eat, with no natural urge to get me to eat. Next story. Warning, very dark. I don't know if you could say we met, but I saw a man in person while attending a sentencing hearing. Those are open to the public where I am, and I needed to attend for job stuff. The defendant tried to commit murder at least 4 times, and he succeeded on the last. Not the same person in repeated attempts either. Random, different people. He literally waited and hid and whatnot in different areas just to kill people he didn't even know. People he never met. And I don't think there was anything the victims had in common either. He got life without parole, and he was only 20 or so. I knew nothing about him until the charges were read, and that day genuinely shook me. Next story. Our company, amongst other things, took orders from phone by a teleshopping channel. A customer asked one of my coworkers if the scalding hot steam carpet cleaner could also be used to wash her dog's fur. And because that coworker wasn't exactly a Harvard graduate, she went to ask our supervisor. And our supervisor said yes, she can absolutely do that. And remember to push for an upsell of some microfiber towels. Next story. Not really the same as meeting someone, but in online games, I recently have seen a pretty sizable uptick of people trying their hardest to hurt you. Not just saying slurs or cursing at you, but trying to find the things that really hurt you. And of course, the moment they start to realize you aren't going to take the bait, or that you aren't being affected, they snap at someone else. These people aren't just messing with one another anymore. It's hateful. Next story. 23M. Last month, I found myself talking to a woman who's 10 years older than me. Got to know the basics of herself and whatnot, so we decided to meet up. Fast forward to the time we link up, and she didn't mention she was drinking beforehand. Doesn't bother me though. We drink more, about to play COD Zombies, and she sees my Microsoft profile picture is a meme of a guy taking back shots saying, "He's busy, text back later." Well, that awoke a dragon. That chick went from throwing jugs of wine all over to kicking me out, then running to make me stay, pulling a gun, calling me her ex's name, screaming at 3:30 a.m., physically assaulting me, and also forgot to mention she got convicted of a DWI and battery. So upon knowing that, I should have known, for 1, she likes to drink, and 2, she likes to fight. I left, and she had no recollection of what happened, told her how it's pretty crazy someone 10 years younger has a straighter head, and must have hit pretty hard from what I've seen because she went on this fake "I'm not drinking" act for like 2 weeks, and then started it up again. I was also in a 7-year relationship with an abusive woman, so trying to get out and see people only to have that happen to me was pretty eye-opening. Next story. Dude was a new housemate. Young guy moved in. On the second or third day, noticed my second car was parked slightly weird. Meh, didn't think anything of it though. Had to travel abroad, so I left the house. About a week later, I get a call from my other roommate that my car is crashed in the driveway. A neighbor says he saw the new guy crash the car. I call the new guy and there's this bonkers story I can't be bothered repeating about a stranger crashing the car, etc. Crazy made up stuff, but new guy sticks to it and seems to have an answer for everything. Finally, I come back and confront the new guy, and he's still sticking to the story. Denied he was driving the car while I was away. He didn't even have a driving license, and he was confused why I was questioning on this, and also concerned that he couldn't live there anymore. But this guy denied it to the end, smiling the whole time, confused why everyone was making such a fuss. Utter psychopath. I didn't even want to press the issue with the police because he gave me such chills. Months later, I got a call from the insurance company, and the insurance guy was completely exasperated. Said the new guy was crazy, and I said, yeah, I know. Next story. New guy started at work. Not introduced to him or anything, just brushed past him a couple of times. Eating lunch alone in the break room, enter new guy. So casual new starter conversation ensues. I start eating a yogurt, I'm a fussy eater. I spooned the more settled bits of yogurt off the sides and placed them carefully atop the lid of said yogurt. The new guy asks, "Are you gonna eat that?" And I explain my fussiness and inform him that no, I will not in fact be eating those. So this MF proceeds to eat the lumps off my yogurt lid and lick the lid clean before discarding it. Now, I don't know if psychopath is an overreaction purely based on my dislike of settled yogurt, but this began a 6-month-long immediate distaste whenever this guy appeared again. During this period, he did then go on to ask me, alone and without context, if I had ever thought about what I would do with a dead body if I had/found one. Potentially more psychopathic. Next story. I had a friend who told jokingly how she and her sister killed their cat when they were children. They had played a game where they tied a rope around the cat's neck and flung it around. She told me they didn't realize it would hurt the cat. I say bullcrap. They weren't so young that they wouldn't have been aware that if you literally strangle a living being, it will die. I was disturbed and I asked if the cat tried to get out, and her answer was, "Well, yeah, but we just thought it was funny when it jumped and tried to struggle out of it." And I was so shocked. The same friend cut her other cat's fur when she was 13. Again, for fun, leaving it full of bald spots. The cat was an outdoor cat. In addition, her father had a dog that he kept in a short rope tied into a doghouse. No matter the time of the year or weather, the dog understandably had aggression problems, and in the end, the dad had to shoot it. She has also never had any kind of empathy, and is a very, very manipulative person. She is always the victim, and everyone else is the bad guy. Me, I cut my ties with her, and life has been so much more peaceful. She would always purposefully get herself into situations where it looked like she was the lady in distress, but later just laugh about how fun it was. I was like a mother trying to keep her from going along with guys that she had just met, etc. I cannot understand how anyone can hurt an animal, though. My heart breaks for all of the animals that she and her family have owned. Her family is just very, very problematic, and I think it has contributed to her personality. Sorry if there are any weird sentences. English is not my first language. So I've been meaning to say this for a while now, but cats have just been the subject of so much crazy stuff throughout this video. Have you noticed that? Maybe it's a bad time to mention it, but you know how online there's this joke that all hamster gerbil owners their pets die in these weird ways, or they just explode sometimes? Well, maybe every psychopath has a cat story, I guess. It's just really weird to me. But anyway, next story. So, you don't have that realization when you first meet someone like that, because they are charming and likable at first. It's a gift of theirs. You have that moment once they're familiar with you and know what's important to you, and they manually stop making the choice to pretend to give a crap for the first time. Mask up, mask down, over and over again until it's a cycle and you dread speaking to them on an instinctive level. You dread it, but you can't help it. You can't cut them off. On one level, they seem to have a control over your autonomy because you don't want to piss them off. You feel mocked, you feel disrespected, and you feel resentful. On another level, they seem to need you. They require a lot of you and don't know what it means. You can feel that they don't like you, and yet everyone thinks that you are so close. They associate you with your psychopath. And your psychopath is needy, backhanded, grateful. You're an energy juice box and they drink you dry just to regurgitate your soul back in through the straw until you can't remember who you used to be. More and more, it's a brutal experience. Next story. Went on a holiday and met this lovely couple while having dinner. They joined us for a few drinks later and gradually told us one weird thing about themselves after another. It started with their voting history, then their proud boasting of how many guns they own. Then they said how they bought a large ranch, they built a large bunker on it, they've built it up for the inevitable race war. I thought like bunkers were for bombs, not sure how that tracks. How they're prepared to overthrow the government. At least they were, but they're happy now, of course. They're homeschooling their children, but not that textbook crap, but real values, like not to mix with other races. They've taught their children, aged 6, how to dispose of guns and not get caught. Anyway, another couple I saw a few months ago I overheard saying, if I had the chance, I'd have gone to Epstein Island. Not sure which of the two couples I like the least. Next story. My wife's friends have a 5-year-old who is shockingly badly behaved and a danger to herself and others. And I thought maybe she was just a horrible little child with no boundaries. But my wife told her once, "Be careful of my arm, it's broken. If it gets knocked, it could really hurt me." And then the child spent the next couple of hours trying to get to and damage my wife's broken arm. Interestingly, sometimes not in an overt way like punching or kicking it, she would pretend to be affectionate and then grab it or try to lie on it and things. But anyway, she could get to it and she could hurt it. Now also, I think hitting children is wrong, but when she was told over and over again, "Don't touch the pizza when it comes out of the oven, it's hot," and she immediately grabbed it, I didn't stop her, and she burned her mouth, and I was glad, and told her actions have consequences. So maybe I messed up too, but I don't regret it. Next story. Oh, I got this. My wife took me on a trip with her friend group to an escape room in Orlando. Her friend Melody rode with us in the car. About an hour in, she told us how a new mosque was built by her house. She told us she would prefer that it be burned down. I mean, I won't do it, but I wouldn't tell the cops who did it either. Now, that's not the crazy thing, though. The crazy thing was, she then told a 30-minute story about how God had entered her body and wrote a true version of the Passion Play, and all other Passion Play were godless lies. We ran over 20 minutes in the escape room. Next story. New coworker was brought into our team after a merger. He was a cookie-cutter looking white dude. Shaved head, lanky, liked to get into political arguments with another coworker, had pretty far-right views, hated Obama. Oh well, to each his own. But he had a really cold demeanor, and his eyes were just dead. Pretty creepy guy. One day he got into it with our coworker and said, "This is why women belong at home." I was like, F me, he actually said that. Coworker he was arguing with was a woman, by the way. A couple of weeks later, he was promised another job in DC. Left the company and the job ended up failing though. So he tried to come back, but our manager decided not to bring him back. About a year later, he was arrested for strangling his wife to death in front of their 5-year-old and tried to dump the body in the woods. Next story. I had a coworker in a lab that was a medical student. Let's call her Angela. At the time, a lot of my classmates were pre-med, so I was familiar with some level of cutthroat academic competition, but Angela took it to another level. The moment that made me realize that she was at least a sociopath was her unprompted take on abortion. And it was that she was in favor of banning abortions because, 1, if her med school classmates got pregnant, that would mean less competition, and 2, she knew how to perform abortions and could make money doing them illegally. No one would call her position pro-life. She really only cared about herself. I eventually asked her if she thought that she was a sociopath, and I read her the definition, and she coolly responded that she thought that described her well. Angela is now a surgeon. Next story. The gentleman that I didn't get along with likes to put on a show for other people, hugging people in public, compliments, fake happiness. One day in a private meeting with my director, he opened the door up and came up to me and hugged me. I grimaced, and my director saw my face. I very much dislike people who do things like this. If you aren't being this friendly in private, don't put on a show in public. Next story. He was drunk. I was very uncomfortable. He invited me into his house, and first thing he did was try to fix his keyboard he bought that day. And when it wasn't working, he screamed at it. He then proceeded to talk about all of the misfortunate events of his life and his family member dying. All of this without asking me a single question. He then sat way too close and tried to kiss me with absolutely no warning signs. I think I may have swooped out of the way and he got increasingly bitter and agitated. He then poured me alcohol and I texted my friend to make up an emergency and they called me and made up a story and I ran away. Never turned back. Honestly scared me for life. Next story. Listening to a cop I worked security with enthusiastically gush about how he loved being a cop because he got to hurt people he did not like. Also knew a chief of a private country club who's a real piece of work he was. He was seriously juiced in with members on the board of directors so he could get away with despicable things. For example, he cornered his boss in a storeroom and SA'd her. Completely got away with it, and she was eventually fired. He worked there for decades and became untouchable by becoming the club's brand that the club generally depended on. Also, befriended powerful members. It has been 6 years, but I bet he still works there. Next story. Happened a couple of times. The one that stands out most to me was the boyfriend of a girl in one of my social circles. He introduced himself to the group for the first time, shaking hands and exchanging names, and when he got to me, he just looked at me like a robot. Nothing malignant, but just not there. It was like he had rehearsed this 1,000 times because even down to the tone and inflection, he had copy-pasted his way through the group up to me. Then he shook my hand, said his name, looked me in the eye with a smile of someone with a mild toothache and just held it there, lagging until I replied with my part. It was just a split second, but it put all of my hairs up. I replied, and then he moved on like nothing happened. Now, some of you might be thinking that he was socially awkward or even autistic to some degree and aware enough to practice such interacting with others. That would be fair, except nothing about his conduct gave me any hint that he cared at all, let alone enough to practice something. He just wasn't there, as if I was talking to a very complicated machine that said the right words back at me. Anyway, the evening went fine, and like I had guessed, that relationship, it didn't last. Again, I stress that I didn't detect any ill intent, just that the lights were on, but there was nobody at home. Next story. When I was about 5, my parents would make my brother take me with him to hang out with his friends. So he'd leave me in the woods sometimes to play by myself, and then get me later. And that's where I met a neighbor kid, and we became friends. I just want to say, when you're that young, everything you experience is normal. He taught me how to catch animals and torture them in a way to cause the most pain without killing them or letting them get used to the pain. He taught me how to case a building for the best place to start a fire and get away unseen, which we did a couple of times. He taught me how to cry on command to get out of trouble if we got caught, and how to deflect the blame to someone we made up. He'd show me adult content in the woods, and we'd pleasure each other off. My parents made me stop playing with him, and I assumed they found out what we were up to. My mom still doesn't know about any of it, but I mentioned it to my dad a couple of years ago, and he told me they didn't know about any of that, and the reason they banned me from hanging out was because my dad caught him trying to steal one of my dad's guns. Next story. So I attended the same small elementary school and later college with a girl named Amanda. She was a grade below me. In middle school, her mom invited the girls' basketball team to their house for a sleepover, and somehow I became the chosen target. No idea why, but I was the classic nice, quiet, slightly overweight girl, so I guess I was easy. I was told that a group of the other girls wanted to cut my hair and paint my face like a clown while I was sleeping. Thankfully, a group of friends vowed to protect me, and we ended up camping out upstairs in an unfinished, unheated attic space. Terribly cold, but I felt so much gratitude towards my friends for that. Come to find out, though, it was Amanda who spread the rumor and wanted to do those things. Apparently, she hated me. Really not sure why, as we never interacted. I suspect it was because I had bigger breasts at that age, unfortunate trait in my family, and she might have been jealous. Some years later, we ended up attending the same college. Saw her one day while exiting my vehicle on the way to class, and smiled and nodded. I came back to leave and found my tire making a grinding noise. Took it to a nearby shop, and when the mechanic kicked the tire, the whole thing shifted. I truly believed she loosened my lug nut as my tire was just about ready to fall off. I was pretty religious about checking my tires every day since I lived on gravel. Then I was on a collegiate soil judging team with her, and during one trip, she started talking about her experiences hunting. She bragged about shooting a big buck, a male deer, but missing so badly that she shot his tail off, then his jaw, then finally shot a hole in the stomach. She giggled as she described his intestines escaping the gaping hole in his abdomen and how he kept tripping on them while trying to run away. I think she finally managed to shoot his spine and paralyzed him. The whole van was quiet, but she didn't seem to recognize why. Then she later went on to describe seeing a bunch of baby raccoons that had gotten hit on the road and how she stopped to run them over again. She framed that one as a mercy killing, but her previous story made me wonder. She had lots of hunting stories about seeing beautiful animals, then immediately taking a shot at them, and thankfully missing because she was obviously a terrible shot. And the thing is, she still lives near the same area that we grew up, and I steer clear of her at all costs. I never felt safe around her. There were other small events that I didn't describe, but it felt like bullying rather than psychopathic behavior. But it just seemed to build and build over the years until her facade began to crack. I truly believe she is either a psychopath or has some sort of serious mental illness. Next story. Met a girl on Hinge and we really hit it off over the next few weeks, talking on the phone and texting in the lead up to meeting for the first time. We ended up meeting for dinner and it went really too well. We hooked up in my car in the parking lot and that was what sealed it for her. We were now together. Except I didn't know that, not until later. So we saw each other a few more times, with one of them being at my place and then at hers. It was the visit at her place where her true colors started to shine. She started criticizing everything I had ever told her, telling me that if we were going to be together, she expects X, Y, Z out of me, that I'm not to talk or even look at other women if she isn't around, and she wants full access to my phone anytime she wants it. Me, I was working a decent job at the time. I'm still working in the same industry, but have moved up considerably. And she didn't like it. She tells me I need to find something else that she, not me, can take pride in and not embarrass her for working. That was enough for me. So I was as nice as I could be and put up with the rant and prison rules that she was attempting to tell me, but I called it there and told her it wasn't going to work. She lost her collective crap and starts bawling her eyes out, and for the first time since we met, starts literally behaving like a child. I mean, seriously, talking in a child's voice, throwing herself on the floor, etc. She was 31. Fast forward to about a week later and I'm coming home from the grocery store around 9 p.m. and who do I see come sitting on the third floor stairs outside of my apartment? Her. She did this multiple times over the next month and eventually stopped sitting outside of my door. But instead, I would see her sitting in her car, watching me. At some point, I guess she gave up and I stopped seeing her around, or so I think, but it really made me hesitant to meet up with anyone else off of a dating app for a while. Next story. When I saw a relative of mine shaking vigorously, holding their child's shoulder saying she, the child of hers, had a demon inside of her and was taking it out. She did this when her daughter threw something in anger while visiting family and broke something. The mom was embarrassed that her teen daughter has anger issues, like any teen, so instead of leaving the girl to herself and some alone time to cool off, she decided to blame it on a demon inside of her. I knew B was cracked since then. Next story. My mother is a psychopath. She abuses me, beats me up, doesn't let me have an opinion or freedom to live the way I want to, and when I try, she brings me down and then goes around telling people how I am such a crappy daughter and I stay inside the house 24/7. And after abusing me brutally, she hugs me tightly and starts crying in front of me, as if she's trying to tell me she is not bad. It's just the heat of the moment, and that it always flabbergasted me. Next story. So, a friend of a friend was drunkenly telling a story when he was at a guy's place, and the guy apparently was very high and knocked over his drink. He also said the guy had an annoying voice. So to spite him, he let his dog out into the woods of the middle of the night with no collar, and he told this story while giggling and smiling. But you could immediately see his face turn into regret and horror that he actually revealed that story to me. Like he just revealed a side of himself that he doesn't want others knowing, and I pretended that I didn't hear him properly. I think you do need to hear him properly. When somebody tells you or shows you who they are, believe them, because next, that's your dog, or given the theme of this video, that's your cat. But anyway, I was waiting throughout the entirety of this video to see if there was anything that jogged my memory regarding if I've met any psychopaths. Not really. I've met some crazies. There was a neo-Nazi that I didn't know when we met. There was a guy who joined the military who I feel like was the type who joins the military to kill people. And also one of my old gaming buddies apparently killed his dad and got the insanity plea. I don't know. He's not in jail is what I'm saying. So somehow he got away with it. I don't know if it was self-defense or not, but he killed someone, but not really many psychopaths in my life, thankfully. But anyway, guys, we're at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, commenting. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.